We're back at the News Center of Rappler, and we have with us here Professor Ranjit Rai, who is a member of the faculty of the UP Political Science Department. Nice to have you here, Professor Rai.
It's an honor to be here and to be with you,
You're a political scientist, and I'm sure that in the last 90 days you have been watching what has been happening. Now that we have come to the end of the campaign period of this election, what is your assessment of the campaign?
Okay, it was a highly competitive campaign. It's extremely vicious at certain point, and you know, it was also a very expensive campaign. So much was spent on ads this year.
When you compare this campaign to past campaigns, are you saying that it is?
I think this will come out as one of the more expensive, if not the most expensive campaign we've had, no, in post EDSA, or even I think historically the amount of money spent by candidates are in the billions, no.
Mm-hmm. Where did you see that?
No, I mean, all you have to go to is Nielsen and all these other ad agencies tracking expenditures, and already the last I saw, people are spending in the range of 100 million, and that was what, a month or two ago. So this is a very expensive campaign. It's also a deeply polarizing one, as all elections tend to be, but I think more so now. No, there's so much passion and emotion invested in this whole exercise. Mm-hmm. On that aside, I think it's still a step forward as far as democracy is concerned. I think.
Well, why do you say that?
You know, there's so much talk now. I think largely irresponsible talk about democracy deferred, that somehow whatever that the outcome of this whole exercise will likely be, you know, democracy delegitimized, no? Or democracy, it's a term, fatigue. Okay, I completely disagree. I think it's irresponsible. What this whole exercise reaffirms is actually democracy is alive and well in the Philippines.
And kicking.
Yeah, it's alive. Well, it's imperfect, definitely. And one thing more to emphasize about the elections, it wasn't all very good. The discourse wasn't very high at all points. There were so many low points during the campaign. The rhetoric was unnecessarily vicious and personal and petty, you know. But by and large, the whole exercise reaffirms the democratic process, and I'd like to emphasize that maybe in our conversation. So many have written, both locally and outside, about this being the end of democracy here. It's irresponsible element. It's
when you say that the discourse was low and it wasn't
always high, it wasn't always lofty and inspiring. The discourse between the candidates, the kinds of rhetoric coming from both the campaign teams and the supporters wasn't always enlightening and you know, informed or even educated, no. But by and large, it was still so many people got engaged, no. So we began
more than before.
I don't know. We'll find out. I think the reckoning is tomorrow. Look at the participation. How many of our electorate will actually go out and vote? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm hopeful, though.
Hopeful. You're optimistic.
I'm extremely optimistic.
What are you optimistic about?
I'm optimistic about, you know, the fact that democracy is alive and kicking. That after tomorrow we'll have a new government. People are focusing on the presidency alone. There's actually a whole lot of other officials that are going to be coming to power tomorrow.
18,000 positions.
I know.
Yes.
And
18,000, and we're focused on one.
The local government system, much of the legislature will be voted into power tomorrow. Will it be a major break as far as politics, elite politics is concerned? I don't think so. There'll be, I'm hoping for some, you know, milestones as far as, you know, new, you know, stories of genuine empowerment from people who are not generally part of the elite, the oligarchy or proxies of the elites.
But don't you think sometimes when these political personalities always talk about inclusive growth, considering the poor, considering the marginalized. That's seasonal talk. That's just talk
Yeah, it's
for the campaign.
election. Yeah, for the campaign. Yeah.
And then once power has kicked in, it's the elite again.
Well, there's a palpable difference now. No? So many people have high hopes about this, the front runner. The front runner is an incredible phenomenon to study. You know, he's an irony of sorts. No? Not your usual front runner during national elections. Anti-establishment, very, how should I say this, rough on the edges, and a kind of a character that you wouldn't predict to be number one at this time. And so at some level, his rise mirrors the kind of expectations we have. At least 30% of the population really think that this election is about empowerment, and well, a lot of them actually, more than that, no? Think about elections as a tool for empowerment and change. So
what does it say about the electorate?
I think, despite various criticisms that our voters are, some people say bobotante, mga bobo, at actually our electorate is quite intelligent. I think it's a vastly more educated and really better informed electorate than, let's say, the past 10 years. When I started voting, you have an electorate now, it's gone through high school at the very least. Products of the free education system. So they're educated, and now because of multimedia like Rappler, the advent of mass media here in a very big way, they're not just educated, they're also better informed. So you have people who are from Tawi-Tawi are able through the internet to connect
yes,
and be informed the same way as students or the youth. I forgot to say, there's also it's a very youthful vote now.
It's a young vote.
It's a young vote, yeah.
But have we risen above the personalistic character of the way we vote?
I don't think that will change unless institutions strengthen. We had our Commissioner Guanzon, no? She talked about weak party systems. Weak institutions such as political parties tend to create this kind of electoral dynamics, this kind of political dynamics. Why? Because if you have weak parties, they don't discipline. The parties are supposed to stand for, be organized around platform, program, ideology.
Do we have that already?
We don't. That's the problem. The weakness of that element of our political system makes it very hard for that institution to discipline our politics. So this is the key challenge now. Not just, it's a key challenge even for the incoming president to start discussion about political party reform, for example. A part of that whole discourse also includes discussing campaign fund reform. How can people spend so much money, to be elected?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a travesty of sorts, no? Only rich people with access to resources in the billions, who can put their name on the ballot and run.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. So parang there's so much to reform institutionally, and maybe that's where your question is extremely relevant. See, the personalism tends to obfuscate, or not make clear the real issue, which is institutional reform. And we put our presidents on a pedestal. That's why there's so much expectation. It's scary, actually, for whoever wins. No? That one person will be the messiah for all our problems. He
has to have a magic wand to get things all done in one sweep.
Which, by the way, is a misnomer of sorts. It's something that no person can actually do. No institution by itself can actually implement.
So is the electorate being realistic?
I hope
when we're faced with all of these promises, all of the candidates promise almost the same thing.
Yeah.
Has our electorate been able to sift through the debris and get to what is important?
I'd like to believe so. I think we're an evolving project. Citizenship and leadership is something that's a work in progress. I'd like to believe that we have a lot of voters who see elections not as a money-making business, not see elections as a way to get resources from the elite, but instead who see elections as a tool for empowerment and transformation. I'd like to believe, I don't have the data, of course, but I'd like to believe that a lot of people are like that. And to some, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe that's why people are looking at the Duterte phenomenon, not for the persona, but for the social movement has created. I was talking to a fishbowl vendor in UP. I think you know this because you were also.
Yes, I used to buy from the fishbowl.
Oh yes, all of us have our experiences with fishbowl vendors in UP, and
yes.
And by the way, some of them
they have wisdom.
Yeah, some of the best political analysts in UP are the
fishbowl
vendors. Yeah. And one vendor was saying in Tagalog, sabi niya, mahirap kalabanin si Duterte dahil hindi mo kalaban kandidato, kalaban mo kilusan. Kilusan na. So it become a movement. Yeah.
A movement. And what
rightly
is that?
Or wrongly, no?
Okay,
it's become
what is that movement?
It's a movement that seeks, in my view, transformation. And I don't know if Duterte is the right guy, to lead that social movement. But the thing is, it does exist. There's a yearning for empowerment. There's a yearning for some significant transformation to happen. And if he wins, this is going to be his Calvary, no? This is going to be his sword as well as his cross to bear.
Okay.
A movement that can push his reforms if well utilized. But it's also going to be a movement that has high expectations for him to succeed. So
and difficult.
Yeah. So it's a double-edged sword for him right now. He has this whole. He mentioned his campaign. The people are his machinery because it's not about machinery.
Yes.
Like, let's say,
you are my, what is his quote? It's like, you are my machinery.
Yeah, something like that. Because it's going to be a key issue coming, as this whole electoral process concludes. Okay, that, personal agency versus machinery,
Yes.
These are particular views about Philippine politics. Leaders are brought into power by your political party, your machinery and resources, versus those who believe agentially that elections about people taking a stake, taking a position and making a stake. No.
Yes.
Okay. So.
But speaking of political machinery, it's been bandied about. This term has been used very loosely. What is political machinery?
Okay. Again, simply put, these are all those elements of your campaign organization that help you mobilize, okay, protect and sustain your vote. Okay, in the 70s literature, it refers to a particular structure of politics or voter mobilization, they call it, that has moved away from what you call patron-client, which is so popular during our time. Clientelist, it's still clientelistic, but it's not anymore personal. It's more impersonal. It's built around a leadership, a network of leaders that have a foothold in the community, and it's more transactional. I mean, it's based on money, not on personal relationships. Yeah. So it's also much more short term and professional in that sense.
Okay, how effective is that in an election like this?
Well, given the fact that we don't have real political parties that mobilize vote, these networks, and they're personal, as you rightly pointed out, these personal networks do help in transmitting the messaging of a campaign, ensuring that voters come out to vote. And that's going to be a big thing tomorrow. The turnout is going to be a crucial thing in an election that seems to be, at least on paper, much closer than people think.
Okay, and they speak of command votes.
Yeah, control. These are the votes that are already yours, no? And that whole perspective about politics will be tested tomorrow. Aside from the gamut of institutions we call democratic institutions, tomorrow is a big test, not just for candidates, a test of our democracy. Can we have peaceful, honest elections?
What's your fearless forecast?
Rather than forecast, if I may answer it this way, my own yearning is for the electorate to focus not on the candidate anymore, but on the country. My yearning is for tomorrow people come out not as partisan, individuals but as citizens. My yearning is for people to see elections as an important step forward, and that they treat it seriously. They reflect on their choices, and that it doesn't end with the vote tomorrow. Your citizenship, what you do as an individual, as a citizen, is as important as anything government does. And that's my yearning for tomorrow. That whatever happens, okay, we take part, okay, in ensuring that the vote is not just efficient, clean, but also honest. No, so when you stop after you vote, take part in the volunteer organizations around your community to ensure that the vote is counted. No.
Okay, but that requires maturity on the part of the voter.
I think a lot of people are. This is
where do you see that?
I see that in my community, where I'm part of. I see everyday people who are generally apathetic, so involved in this particular election.
Okay.
And so
because of the personalities, or because of the...
I think it's a combination. The personalities are one thing. It's also because of the mass media. The media has also hyped this election to the hilt, and
rightly or wrongly.
Rightly and wrongly, but I think rightly as far as Rappler is concerned. I mean, the stakes are high, and people are, I think, well aware of that. And so people are not just going into this as an intellectual exercise, but as a genuine act of citizenship. Others are very elections now, it's an emotional experience for some people. I mean, last night, I was in another channel doing comments on the last rallies, the meeting the advance of
last night. Yes.
And we got feedback from people in different from the different different assemblies, and saying that it's become very emotional for many. Duterte meeting the advance was more than what they expected. Apparently 500,000 people went, but the police say it's about 350,000, but if you look at the numbers in the other rallies, 50,000, 20,000, so many people went there, and it was like a catharsis for some. So tomorrow is going to be potentially a situation where we'll come together as a nation, or it can also be volatile. Depends on how responsible people are,
Yes. This volatility, because it's highly charged, it's highly emotional, and people are invested in it emotionally, as you said. The volatility factor, is this something that you are anticipating for tomorrow, just in case, for example, if it doesn't go the way they want it to go,
this is why I'm saying that the irresponsible rhetoric and partisanship has to end. And all sides are using the social media as a medium to transact this kind of engagement, and so and it's not doing our democracy good to question its results even when it has not come out yet, or
to imply that there might be cheating. Yes.
And then that's where we have to exhort our citizens to be more responsible, to be more level-headed, to think not of the candidate but of the country at the moment, to break away from partisanship and embrace citizenship and patriotism tomorrow. And it's it's a bit idealistic, but it's something we media and academia have to exhort in the last day of the. Although the Mama at the church will come out with their own statement, and that's gonna calm everybody down.
Is citizenship still an alien concept to us voters?
I don't think so. I think people have a definite understanding of who they are, what they want, and where they want to go.
Or what does citizenship mean?
The involvement, the notion of sense of self and community, I think is still strong in the Philippines. But it's a good question to ask. It's hard to answer now, given looking at the data we have. Looking at the data is interesting in a way. When you look at the elections now, it's really, the Duterte phenomena is really a regional ethnic vote. Let's face it, 50% of his vote come from Mindanao and from the Visayan vote. Okay? When you look at the numbers of Bongbong Marcos, it's the same thing. These cleavages in politics are real.
Regional cleavages.
It's a real challenge today in Philippine politics. I don't know if that's bad or good, that people don't see person for for what he stands for the ideas and ideology that he espouses, but really for his ethnic background.
Uh-huh.
And so this
Or
election,
whether you find him charming, or whether you find her affable,
Yeah.
credible, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So how can you say that we have matured if we are still stuck in that, in the rut, so to speak?
well, it's not necessarily a bad thing to consider somebody just because, or because he is a member of your own ethnic group. It's not so. But
But
the
we have
idea,
not gone beyond the regional, that penchant for voting for somebody because he's my province mate.
yeah. But the thing is, that's a project that won't be resolved by this election. It's a continuing thing.
Yes.
The idea
No, but
there is
that's why it brings you back to the question of citizenship. As a citizen thinks outside his region,
yeah.
thinks of the whole country.
I think that's one side what I talked about. The other side is the idea that people have common hopes and dreams and aspirations, and that they feel one candidate or their candidate espouses that, so that the kind of responsible, that visioning for the community, not just for the self. I think
Yeah.
it's there.
Uh-huh.
And what I lament, of course, are intelligent people who are part of the different campaigns attacking the very system that they're trying to extol, which is democracy. Okay, and saying that whatever happens tomorrow, if their candidate doesn't win, it's either they were cheated or
It's a preconditioning.
yeah. They call the new term now is mind control. No,
Mind control.
Okay, it's come out in the media, and I think it's sad, no, because instead of extolling the exercise as an engagement that might unify the nation, it's already predetermined to. They're already predetermining, the outcome to be creating uncertainty and volatility. So I think that is irresponsible, especially for people who already, who are in the know and who have taken part in this process, who are just doing this because they're partisan.
Yes. It's interesting. We were talking to our social media persons earlier, and they were saying that some of the social media tweets that have been coming out have now resulted in comments like, let's think about the Philippines, let's think about our country, moving away from the partisan comments and the bitter comments that were seen in the last few days. So maybe this is a coming together, a calming?
I think media.
Or is it a calming before the storm?
It's possible. It could be both. It's really hard to answer those questions. But the thing is, we still have a day or two to harp on this. Media has a responsibility now.
Do you think media has been responsible?
I don't. Well, that has been I'm divided on that. Media. Well, by and large, I think it has been responsible, but a segment of it has been exceedingly partisan and irresponsible. And it's a new time, it's a new age. Today, the internet, social media has become an important factor in Philippine politics. Today, perception is political, and social media, although I don't have the studies yet, we haven't studied it very well. We need to study it more. It's now shaping perception. It's now become very political. Filipinos who don't like to engage each other in real life, in debate, are now engaging themselves in debate in social media. It's become the intermediary for participation and engagement. Maybe that's a good thing. No, I think by and large it's a good thing, but it's also become a tool for misinformation and I'm not saying we should police or anything, but there should be some sort of civic ethics, and responsibility as far as media is. And
there should be self-regulation.
Self-regulation, and the social media now has become a tool for bashing people. It's
also a tool for disinformation.
Misinformation. As I was saying, so much misinformation has been spread largely through social media.
But traditional media, can you comment on them?
I think there has, in the last month or so, I think, well, by and large, they've been very neutral, and you saw that in the debates. Everybody had a chance to host a debate and take part in the electoral process. The last month has really been very problematic for me as far as media is concerned. Certain media have taken a side, very partisan, especially in the national the national elections of taking part, supporting certain candidates, or airing certain types of ads, taking part in partisan exercises. Although these are speculations, but people see this, and it's I think something that's sad. No?
What were the Ranjit? What were the three most? Are there three items that struck you the most about this campaign and this election? I mean, we're not up to the voting yet, but so far.
Okay, one is the viciousness. I guess what struck me the most was the kind of vile and what you call this negative political campaigning that happened the last 2 weeks was kind of vicious, no?
Yes.
Although I'm not certain of the data. I think in terms of deaths, no, I think this is not as violent.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. No. Please go ahead.
Not as violent as the past elections have been.
Yes.
But in terms of the rhetoric, it's been very sad, no? The exchange, the kind of misinformation was I think, historic, no?
Yeah.
Okay. What also struck me is the nature of certain campaigns. How a candidate who was so unlikely to be on top, no, and nobody took seriously, has managed to evolve a social movement around him. That's something to marvel at, no?
Yes.
How people who are now supporting Mayor Duterte, people who are not rich, no? These are people who are everyday common Filipino, no? Who exercise who engage in everyday politics in very simple, straightforward ways, are now so organized around him, no? They're the ones spending their own money. They're the ones going out and campaigning for him. They're like they have evolved into the political machinery that is utilized to push his election forward. I'm kind of amazed at that, that people spontaneously, authentically organize. Okay, again, let's get I'm not supporting any candidate. No, I'm not endorsing. But it's
I get your drift.
It's something. It's something you can that anybody empirically can look at and start saying, okay, so Filipinos are capable of this kind of autonomous, authentic and spontaneous engagement, no? Something that the left has been trying to do
for the longest time.
They just saw part of it evolve in this campaign.
Well, you mentioned something about surveys. Let's take a pause at this time. And we're talking to Ranjit Rai, a political analyst, and he's sharing with us some of the ideas that you have come up with.
Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa. Welcome back to Rappler's continuing rolling coverage of the run-up, actually now, 1 day before voting day. Cheche Lazaro has just finished, and during that time period, we heard from COMELEC Commissioner Rowena Guanzon. On the line right now, we have Paterno Esmaquel, who will tell us more about what COMELEC Chairman Andy Bautista just said at COMELEC. Paterno, are you there?
Hi, Maria.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
What did the COMELEC chair have to say?
Well, COMELEC Chairman Andres Bautista held a briefing here. He said he spoke before around 100 foreign observers who want to see how the Philippines does its automated elections, because he says we are a trailblazer in terms of automated elections in the region, and they want to see how we do it exactly. Now, of course, we also asked him about other reminders, last-minute reminders for voters for the elections, and but we can stress it more. Maria, sabi ni COMELEC Chairman Bautista, yung mga resibo, yun ang pinakamahalagang tandaan ng mga botante para bukas, dahil ngayon lang natin gagawin yung pag-issue ng voting receipt na ginawa na natin yung automated elections 2 times in the past, 2010 and 2013. Bukas, hindi pa natin alam yung mangyayari dahil dun sa decision ng Supreme Court na mag-issue yung COMELEC ng mga voting receipts. Ngayon, ang pinakamahalagang sinabi niya tungkol dito, kapag may nakitang mali yung mga botante sa voting receipt, kailangan ipa-minutes yun, ipalagay sa minutes o sa notes ng Board of Election Inspectors. Yung Board of Election Inspectors, yun yung mga teacher na nagsisilbi sa eleksyon. Kailangan nila ipalagay doon para maging official yung kanilang complaint. Ngayon, nagbigay din siya syempre ng warning sa mga netizens, sa mga Pilipinong butante sa social media. Huwag basta-basta maniwala dun sa mga kumakalat na balita na nagkamali yung resibo. Posibleng totoo ito, pero kailangan ang mahalaga maghanap lagi ng pruweba para suportahan yung mga claims na yon. Kung hindi, kumakalat lang yung disinformation. Huwag na raw tayo tumulong pa na kumalat yung disinformation at ma-degrade yung proseso, Maria.
In terms of what you heard though now, what seems to be the greatest dangers moving into tomorrow?
Well, the greatest danger, of course, the effects, of course, of the Supreme Court ruling on voting receipts. Because we haven't tried it before, and the COMELEC has always warned us that issuing voting receipts could open the election process to exploitation. Of course, some political camps could instruct their supporters to claim that they were cheated based on voting receipts. And well, we really don't know how it will turn out. But as Chairman Bautista always says, we are more ready this year compared to 2010 and 2013. We have yet to see that tomorrow, Maria.
Sorry, Paterno, I couldn't hear the last part. You said that COMELEC today is more ready than?
In 2010 and 2013.
More really?
Yeah, that is, actually, we have memorized that line. That is the COMELEC's refrain for the last 2 days of the election preparation. The COMELEC is more ready this year than in 2010 and 2013. We will have to see that tomorrow, Maria.
We will, but we do have some analysts with us who can say, Ronnie, just off the top, Ronald Holmes from Pulse Asia is here with us. We've gone through these election campaigns. Is this claim that COMELEC this year is better than or more ready than 2010 and 2013?
The 2010 elections, I think, if I recall, the COMELEC was a little bit much more prepared because it was the first time that we were holding the automated election count. There were certain decisions that were made earlier. I don't know exactly what's happening in the ground, but I would say that the level of preparations now, at least some of the resolutions are only coming out quite recently.
Right.
And by recently, I mean even just within the past week. We didn't see that same scenario in 2010.
Yes, I know, and I will go back with you on that, Paterno, and I'll back what Ronnie Holmes is saying from Pulse Asia. What I remember from both 2010 and 2013 is 2010 was hyper preparations because it was the first time, and we got the results. We knew who was going to be president by 9:30 that evening.
Yes.
And in the 2013 elections, although the actual transmission was less than 2010, it felt like a lot more was in place. Again, what was the challenge? Did anyone challenge a statement like this?
Well, Maria, COMELEC Chairman Bautista always says that the COMELEC now is targeting 90% transmission rate for the election results. We are unsure how this will happen, but we'll also cite problems, of course, such as poor internet signal, the geography of the Philippines. Of course, those are the promises of the COMELEC, and as we always know, it's much easier to make promises than actually fulfill these promises, Maria.
I think the main question I would have for COMELEC would be in terms of the last-minute decisions that are being pushed forward, and that started with the Supreme Court decision to put the voting receipts, and then
yes,
as Ronnie said, just in this week alone, there were several decisions. Is the workflow in place for the people who were going to be carrying it out?
Yeah, one of the last-minute changes was the decision to issue replacement ballots for voters if the machine rejects their ballot through no fault of their own. So that was a novelty of the COMELEC a few weeks ago after the Supreme Court made that make or break decision on voting receipts. So that was the last-minute decision of the COMELEC to issue replacement ballots, and then it received criticisms from COMELEC Commissioner Gregorio Larrazabal and other watchdogs like what would be the criteria for issuing replacement ballots? Because at first they decided it should be an unlimited number of replacement ballots, but the watchdogs and even some COMELEC commissioners said the COMELEC would run out of ballots because so this week or last week the COMELEC issued a clarification that they would only issue one replacement ballot, but of course questions remain such as when will the teachers issue the replacement ballot? We are not sure how this was cascaded to our teachers, but during our webinar in Rappler, we remember that there were teachers still asking about the procedure. So that could be an indication of how things are going in the field, Maria.
Fantastic. So we will keep coming back to you, Paterno. There are other questions about the BEI. It is the final hours. Hopefully we'll get you back this evening to take a final look before we begin bright and early tomorrow. Thanks, Paterno Esmaquel at COMELEC. Joining us now actually are two gentlemen I am looking forward to chatting with. On my right, you see the Pulse Asia president. He's also with LaSalle, Professor Ronald Holmes. Thanks for coming here. And coming back again is Ranjit. He's UP Political Science Professor and Assistant Vice President for Public Affairs, Ranjit Rai. I'm going to go right to Pulse Asia to look at the surveys. I mean, what surprised you the most in these elections, Ronnie?
Well, the surprising thing really was that from the start we saw that there were more contenders in this election if you compare it to prior elections. In our initial surveys, we had a longer list, but after the filing of candidacy, specifically after the period when you can substitute, the list was whittled down to 5. And among these 5, 4 of them essentially got at least a fifth of the pre-election preference. And there were changes in terms of who was at the top. To the extent that across maybe 4 months, you had someone leading but not too far off were 3 other contenders who were, in certain occasions, statistically tied or pretty proximate to one another in terms of voting support. This is quite unique if we compare it with prior elections after 1986, when at best you would have about 2 main contenders. In 1992, in the pre-election polls, you had Ramos on top, you had Miriam catching up. Miriam Santiago then, I think, was slightly ahead in the last poll done by social weather stations. But you also had another candidate moving up in that particular last poll, that was Ambassador Danling Cojuangco.
Right.
In 1998, that was really a contest where Ella Estrada really dominated. Yes. In 2004, it was a close race between GMA and FPJ. 2010, it was close until January 2010. But then the preferences, pre-election preferences for Manny Villar started to decline because of all the negative reports and all of the criticisms. And by that time, even Senator Aquino's own preferences were not moving, but still significantly higher than any other contender. This one was really too tight.
Until the end.
From about January until the last survey that we conducted.
And in this one, actually what I want to do is to just call up, if we can pull this up on screen for you guys. Let's take the presidential surveys, and this is actually something that shows a combination of Pulse Asia, SWS, and LILO, the candidates' performances over time. And I guess I want to ask both of you, if we take a look at that blue line that started at 40% and now is ending at 14.8, Vice President Judge Omar Binay. And then the other part that I thought was fascinating here is this, from 5% Duterte all the way up to 35.4%. Ronnie from Pulse Asia, I mean, you saw this. Was it a surprise for both these men? What were the factors that brought one down and brought the other up?
Well, in our own surveys at the start, when Mayor Duterte had yet to declare that he will be running, actually at that time he was saying that he won't run. This was sometime in March. The lowest that we had him was at 12%. You know, you have someone who said that I'm not running, don't force me to run. but you had 12% of the population expressing support for him.
Yeah.
It never was a single digit in the case of the Pulse Asia surveys. And by the time that he declared, when he substituted, it went up from 16 to 23%. That's the September to December. And it has gone at that level, about a fourth of the voting population in terms of voting support, until mid-March.
So I think you're right. This is as of December 1, 2014, SWS.
Yeah.
So by mid-March, okay, go ahead.
In our case, by mid-March,
12% by March.
He moved up. That was the only significant movement that we saw.
Yes.
Where his pre-election support was from 24 to 30. And I won't point out a single factor that may have brought about an increased support for him. One thing that is noticeable in terms of the fluctuations and changes in the survey pre-election preference is that there were certain things that the candidate, you cannot actually attribute it to what the candidate did. It changes in terms of pre-election support can be attributed to a number of events. When Senator Poe's preferences declined from September to December, the primary event that may have led to the decline would be the disqualification case decision in the COMELEC. So it's not because of what Senator Poe did.
Right,
And at that time, the shift was really a shift of support coming from Senator Poe going to Vice President Binay, who in December had his preference at about a third, almost the same level as what Mayor Duterte had in our last survey. So the movement in terms of the shift in terms of support can be largely hinged on certain events, not so that impact in terms of voting disposition towards each of these candidates rather than what the candidates may have actually done or failed to do.
I see. And what characterized these turning points? Were they personal to each one, or is it?
Well, those were, in the case of, let's say, Senator Poe, in December, it was really the disqualification case. Many of the issues are issues that somehow put into question the character or the competence of each of the candidates. Unfortunately, I mean, in this election, the issues have not really been ascendant. They have not been the basis of, let's say, differentiating candidates.
Have they ever been?
There were occasions in the past where, a candidate would position himself or herself as someone who would be much more reformist. And another candidate will talk about, let's say, ending poverty and a more populist tone. Now, if you go, let's say, for example, in the last debate, when certain issues were tossed to them and when they were asked about their policy positions, you actually don't have a differentiation anymore. But the character of the candidates have been put much more in a microscope, and to a certain extent, those character issues have been much more magnified to a significant extent, much more magnified in this election than what we've had in the past.
Ranjit, what surprised you about these candidates?
Well, I think I agree with Ronnie in the sense that this is a data-driven perception and analysis from Ronnie, but on the ground, I'd like to add that I think to some extent, while I agree with his basic premise that events took place, I think there was some calibration also at the level of campaigns. Also, the perception created by the candidates themselves, the kind of lead. People look at character as their own important factor in determining leadership, and that was a key issue here. I'd like to believe the messaging of Mayor Duterte, it sharpened towards March, no? And a lot of middle-class voters seem to have resonated to a lot of middle-class voters. A lot of people didn't even know Duterte, but the issue of crime and drugs and corruption legitimate us, whether it's legitimate or not, no? A national issue became an important issue for many voters who shifted. I agree with Ronnie that the questions of legitimacy raised against Binay and later on Grace Poe may have shifted preference. The uncertainty about the Grace Poe presidency, actually, in particular, candidacy in particular, I think may have led other supporters to consider other choices. And in that sense, Mayor Duterte became a repository of some of these change of preference. But I'd like to believe there's agential aspect there, you know, that there's things that campaigns, candidates, aside from events, do to help push their own candidacy forward. One major event that I'd like to look into is also the debate performance. The debates apparently were watched by a lot of people.
Yes, yes.
That's both good and bad. Good that, you know, this culture of debate is now emerging. Bad because the discourse wasn't so lofty in all of the debates. And I think the debate performance of Duterte, while not as one would expect, no, did in fact catapult him as a solid alternative, because he questioned the legitimate contenders at the time and created this impression that he might be a viable alternative. So people felt that was the time he moved forward. It also was the period where Grace Poe's candidacy was also being questioned.
Correct.
So I agree with Ronnie that there's a confluence of factors. One can't explain the rise of a campaign monocausally, you know, by saying it's just machinery or, you know, message or personality, but it's also a product of the context where the rise emerged, no? And what's surprising is how sustained the rise was at a very crucial period, the last stretch, no? Last month, tama ba, Ron? The last month he was on top. The first time he was on top, he didn't leave it for, he has not left it, no? Tama ba?
No.
He has kept on it like a top chart hit, no? It's been there consistently for a month now. At the time, when just before the election, so he peaked at the right moment. I don't know if that's too shallow an analysis, but that in a sense is how it looks for me. You know?
But still rising, right? I mean, this is a. I know you have the numbers. If we can see some of it, but that's a steep rise. Is it something that's?
Well, we had one significant increase. This was on a survey that was commissioned, that was published also from middle of March to the end of March.
Yes.
But beyond that significant increase, we saw marginal increases in this case. And that's a 6-point increase from the middle of March, that was a March 15 to 20 survey, to the March 29 to April 3 survey. Well, partly that would really be in terms of the messaging. I think in the case of Mayor Duterte, the advertisements came in late.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, he claims he didn't have the money for it, right?
The reports were actually the ones that were driving more attention, awareness, and even support for him.
This is your reports as in media reports.
The media reports.
Right.
Example, I would say that the debate, people gave attention to were attentive to the debate, not to the debate itself, but the reports of the debates, about the debates.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And those reports may have been much more positive with regard to how Mayor Duterte performed, or at least on the sideline of the pre-debate, for example, video,
right,
or something where Mayor Duterte showed this wittiness more than anything else.
Right.
Those are the things. We have not seen that much of a change across the last 5 surveys, and that's the reason why Mayor Duterte remains on top. We saw a marginal decline on the part of Senator Poe. We saw marginal decline on the part of VP Binay, and a marginal decline and increase on the part of Secretary Rojas. Now, given these marginal movements, if one, even by a single or 2 points, percentage points would increase, then the distance between them is thought to increase. But as I said, no one has pulled away, not Mayor Duterte. It's just a question really of, from our survey observations that have become weekly, which is different from the survey observations we were doing in the past, which were more or less, we did at one point in April in 2010 2 surveys, but they were not weekly. And in that regard, I think the comparison would be, if you do month to month, the increases are not really that significant.
Correct.
Or the changes are not really that significant.
I see. How interesting. You're talking about the ABS-CBN survey.
Yeah, we're talking about our own surveys, because we had our own surveys and then the published ABS-CBN Commission surveys. So there you don't see that much of a change.
Right.
And if you track back to earlier surveys, I think, Maria, one of the things that we saw also in this election is that there's a lot of a geographical basis for voting support, which we have not seen in prior elections. Example, Mayor Duterte, in his case, had always been getting substantial support from Mindanao.
Right.
Because he comes from the place and is the only Mindanaoan among all of the candidates.
Correct.
The other thing that propels the Mindanao support is the fact that we've not had the president from Mindanao.
Yes.
So, and that is 23% of the voting population. If you're getting about half of that, automatically you get about 12 points, right? 12 percentage points. Aside from that, you also have the ethno-linguistic support. The only Cebuano running in this race is Mayor Duterte. Cebuanos will constitute, I mean, I don't have the exact number, but the estimation that you can give is about 20 to 28% of the voting population. And those are not people who are only in Cebu or the central Visayas. They come from all over. They speak the same language. That's the primary language spoken at home. So you have the geographical and the ethno-linguistic. And among the candidates, and that's the reason why, for example, Secretary Rojas' numbers are largely brought about by support coming from Western Visayas and the Negros Island region. Again, geographical also. In the vice presidential race, you have several Bicolanos, and the two Bicolanos that are getting the more significant support would be Lenny Robredo and Chis Escudero.
Correct.
Lenny, however, happens to come from Camp-Sur with a bigger voting population than, let's say, Sorsogon.
Got it.
So that's the spatial geographical element that has come into play in this election. Last time we saw that quite clearly was in 1992 when Miriam Defensor Santiago was getting so much of the Ilonggo support. And Fidel Ramos was getting the Ilocano support, but that Ilocano support was somehow, to a certain extent, also affected by the candidacy of, let's say, Danding Coangco. In 1998, when Raul Roco ran, he got so much of the Bicolano support. That's the ethno-linguistic basis.
Right.
So beyond your messaging, beyond your brainstorming, you also need to note that there is a geographical basis of voting support. And that's a geographical basis that is hard to discount. So when Mayor Duterte started barnstorming in Luzon, and his single-digit preference in earlier surveys moved up to double-digit, he was eating into the support base of candidates who were strong in the balance of Luzon.
Right.
He has always been strong in NCR.
Got it.
Primarily because he was campaigning and harping on an issue that many people in the metropolis may be more concerned about. And this is the issue of personal safety. Whether his record is real or perceived, that record is the one that is really projected, may have attracted the NCR voters. But in the rest of Luzon, he was not getting that much. He only started to get in the double-digit range sometime in February.
Very quite late.
So, again, so when you have a geographical base, and the geographical base happens to be strong, or an ethno-linguistic tie that makes you more appealing to the voters, that's where you have an advantage. And then you add your own brainstorming and messaging. It adds support to what is already a quite significant base to begin with.
The narrative of Duterte's campaign has been, you know, the marginalized coming up, moving against the elite. Is there, and yet the numbers don't seem to show a class divide. Is there a class divide at all?
There used to be, he was not getting as much in Class E, but not to the extent that he was lagging behind in Class E. Which is the lowest socioeconomic class. There were certain candidates, for example, Secretary Ross was getting significant support from Class E, primarily because of the conditional cash transfer, the record of the conditional cash transfer. But it doesn't mean that Class E people are not concerned about personal safety. More often than not, they might be the victims of petty crime, right?
Yes.
You go to an informal settler community in Metro Manila or anywhere else, it might not happen to them, but the worry is there. You can worry about your own personal safety or the personal safety of your children. So there's no class divide. I think if you go by the popular vote, it's a cross-section. It's D, which is the largest class. It's about 70%. E, he gets also significant support. And Class ABC, although we're just simply polling C.
Yes.
He also gets much more substantial support from that particular class than the other candidates for that matter.
Yes.
But the geographical is the one that's quite manifest and distinct.
Fascinating. Vice presidential candidate Alan Peter Cayetano alleged this conspiracy that the elites or some members of the elites don't want them in power or don't want the Duterte in power. Do you see any evidence of anything like this?
It's hard to provide evidence, you know, and I think social media is quite active right now. There are more conspiratorial theories that come about. I would tend not to believe it, but I would say that, I mean, I'm not naive. I'm a political scientist. I would say that there might be, but I don't think it's quite easy to come up with the evidence.
Yes.
And I don't think that the conspiracy tends to just come from just one camp, or the maneuvers come just from one camp. You know, in politics, everything is possible.
Right. Yeah. Let's pull back and let's look at the 2016 elections. You mentioned some of the things that make it different or that made the race tight. But in a big picture, what will these campaigns and elections be remembered for?
Okay, I think, as I said earlier in the earlier part of our interview, you know, although I have to say before that I agree with Ronnie, it's a regional, geographic, ethnic vote. No? And as I said in the earlier part of our interview, that has been the key to the base of Duterte support, and also its wellspring for momentum towards the end. No? The consolidation of that base has also pushed his numbers forward. In areas where it wasn't Cebuano speaking, even in Mindanao, he wasn't getting dominance. As for Zamboanga Peninsula, I noticed that in the SWS surveys, in the Lilo also, that in areas where, actually specifically in Lilo actually, that areas that are not predominantly Cebuano speaking, the numbers are competitive for the other candidates. So it lends to that perspective. It's built around ethnicity and you know, regional geographic. And going back to the question, I think, as I said earlier, the elections have been very competitive. The numbers are still quite fluid. No, the elections will be remembered. This particular elections will be remembered for the viciousness. No, that came out on different forms of media now. No? Not just the traditional media, but also you know, on the web, no, and social media in that sense. Elections also focused on, I mean, in my view, a lot of discussion was focused on character and leadership, no? Especially its contrast with the incumbent leader. Okay. I think it's also important to note that there was a distinct, reasonable, it's reasonable to say that there's also a very big protest vote out there, and that angst and disappointment had to go somewhere, and eventually went to, initially in my view, went to, started by VP Bina and Grace Point. Eventually, I think the repository is now seen in the numbers of Mayor Duterte. I think those elements, I think, are important to note. Also, I think interesting is the lack of, as in other elections, this time it's really parties play no significant role now more than ever.
Yes, exactly.
The institution simply does not have any relevant role.
Right.
Okay, and we have so many independents now. It's a misnomer, no?
Right.
So the parties
exactly.
don't matter anyway, and you know, the last image of politics that seems to resonate with me is it's more changeless things than change, no?
Yeah.
A lot of things have been amplified. Personality politics, ethnic cleavages, political dynasties. So a lot of things have remained the same.
Okay.
And we're hoping tomorrow, maybe there will be some small, minute stories of transformation in the different elections, both local, the local and maybe even the congressional, elections. So hopefully we'll see some Leni Robredo stories, no? But then again, let's see tomorrow. Yeah.
Ronnie.
Well, in terms of what is distinct, I mentioned one. You really have more contenders right now. Second, compared to, let's say, 2010, Maria, I mean, we were observant then. The news about elections in the earlier period, I think from even December on to about March, news reports, And we know that media has a greater influence and is the primary source of information about these candidates.
You have always been constant about this, yeah.
The news reports about the campaign were not as frequent and was not as extensive as it was in 2010. In 2010, I mean, the first 10 minutes of the news,
yes,
15 minutes even, it extended to a longer period, were about the campaign, about the candidates, as early as January. Now, I mean, much of the news, that, at least the news that I get to hear on radio, because those are also broadcast on radio, starts off with the survey to the time of elections.
Okay, 10%. Yeah.
Then you have 15% of the voters who cannot say whether they will or they will not change their votes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those are the undecided.
Yeah.
So if you add those two, that's 25%. This is our own survey. This is not the commission survey. In our
Right.
April survey,
Okay.
you had 10% of those who express a preference for any of the candidates saying, there's a possibility, a big or a very big possibility that we will change our vote
Yes.
from now until May 9.
This is crucial.
Yes.
This information is
There's
crucial.
15% who are undecided. They
Yes.
cannot say whether they will or they will change their mind. That's 25%. That's 1 out of 4 voters.
Yeah.
If you base it on a 54 million registered voting population, a 75% turnout, and that's about 40
half
million.
the
So
6
that's
million.
12.5 million
Yeah,
voters who may shift.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that's a large proportion of voters. Now, will they or will they not shift? Of course, that's only something that we will know on election day.
And you'll have an exit poll, of course.
No.
Yes. Yes.
So no exit poll now. Okay. But that's I guess the story, you know. So it could go either way. It could either reaffirm the last survey, or it could be
You're
something.
saying really we don't know who could win.
Yeah, because
That's what he's saying. That's why it's crucial.
Those figures that I cited come out from an April survey, our own survey, the Pulso ng Bayan survey of April.
Yeah.
Yes.
That survey was conducted from April 16 to 20. So that's what we have. I mean, you have 25%, and you divide that 25%. 40% of that would say that there's a possibility or big possibility they will change their votes. That's 12.5 million. So
Okay, let me press Ronnie just a tad bit more because I'm interested in this. No, now going back to the elections, the last survey you had for 2010, how far was the final results from your actual results of your last survey?
I think it's about 3 percentage points.
So it's
But that's the survey that came 2 weeks before.
2 weeks,
Not the
okay.
survey that we did the week itself,
before.
and not the exit poll in 2010. Maria,
Yeah.
you can recall the exit poll
I
was
do.
just
Yeah. Spot on and pretty
Spot on.
much. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
pretty much spot on.
the last survey.
so what you're saying, by and large, Pulse reads the pulse
Yeah,
very
yeah.
well.
It's not predictive, but it reads the disposition at a given time. The last survey that we conducted was conducted at the end of April. Whatever changes would occur between the end of April
it's
and
2
May
weeks.
9
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
are changes that may be brought about by certain things that the
Dynamics,
candidates
yeah.
do and certain events.
Yes.
And I hope, more importantly, by the sovereign decision of the voters tomorrow.
So let me ask you a question, right? And this is something that's been floated both on social media and among ourselves when we talk. The Duterte camp is absolutely certain they will win, and if we look at the show of support that they've had, you had seen some of this, right? That if you look at the show of support last night, the estimate that they had was about 550,000 people in Luneta Park. If it is as tenuous as the results you have shown, if a Mar Rojas win happens, what will happen next?
Well,
now that's a genie out of the hat.
now, if that happens, then there would be serious questions about what led to that particular result.
But you're saying it is possible.
Yeah, it's possible. But that's coming from partisans.
Right.
Yeah.
And partisans normally won't accept a decision that they feel is something that they cannot predict.
Yes.
But as I said, surveys are not in any way predictive, and there's
Yeah.
a possibility of a change. And
Yes.
we've seen changes across our surveys from March last year.
Yes. But I don't remember an election where the surveys predicted a different winner.
Yeah, that's the
well-
thing, and the spread is so
Large.
large,
Yeah.
Like
you know?
10 to 11.
And then,
But
yeah.
here you do have that question, and that's a question that really somehow would satisfy that possible shift.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think a number of people are pointing out, specifically groups that are allied with each of the contenders, is that their machinery would
Kick in,
produce
yeah.
Yes.
levels of support that surveys do not capture.
Capture.
And I do agree
How many percent is that?
Surveys do not capture much of what could be delivered by a machine.
Yeah.
And what exactly does that mean?
Now, the question is
how much?
Yeah. But I was about to ask the same question, Maria. What is a machine?
Yeah.
And whether these candidates do have that machine. As a political scientist, I would just reserve the right to make a judgment on whether there is such a machine, because we have not seen that machine work in the past.
Correct.
In U.S. politics, in several places in the U.S., when you talk about the machine, it's really a well-oiled organization.
Yes,
There's
network
someone who's
of
calling
leaders.
the shots.
Right.
And people essentially support that boss, largely because their own interests would be protected by that boss.
Yeah, aligned, yeah.
Now, do we have that at the national level? Is that the type of relationship that a national candidate has with local candidates that are allied with them? Do local candidates allied with national candidates have that type of relationship with the voters?
Right.
So you have several layers in the machine.
Right.
For it to operate smoothly, the ties between the national and the local
command
is
and
such
control
that
structure has to
the
exist.
national can control the local, and the tie between the local candidate or the local politician, who effectively is a broker of the national candidate, with the voters, is something that has been cemented for a long time and would exact compliance on the part of the voters.
But I would argue we've seen this break apart, right?
Yeah, but the only candidate, I feel, the two candidates that have that something approximating what Ronnie is talking about is really VP Binay and Mar Rojas. But again, it could reaffirm that image of politics in the country, which is driven by machines, or the agential aspect could be affirmed tomorrow. That we're not driven by machines anymore, that people can autonomously vote.
Very interesting.
And, you know, democracy has moved to a different, you know, a different system of mobilization has emerged, no?
Right.
Yeah, so, but it could also be affirming all of this, no? The question now is what percentage of that will affect, what machine percentage, you know, if we have any number.
Yeah, there are organizations that are known to command.
Yeah.
Let's say what candidates normally look forward to is that they would be endorsed by, let's say, the Iglesia ni Cristo. We know from prior exit polls, we know also from prior surveys that the Iglesia can deliver, the compliance will be about 80 to 90%.
It's about a million votes, more little over a million.
And that's what, about 4% of the total voting population. You'd say that at its height, it's about at the highest, it's about 1.6 million.
Yeah, a little over a million.
So 1.6 million, would that make a difference for candidates? Of course it would, because it's an additional vote.
Yeah.
So if you're endorsed by the Iglesia, that's the amount of votes that you get. But we also know, based on our surveys, we are able to capture some of the Iglesia's because we do get randomly selected Iglesia members, and we're able to capture how their preferences are distributed at a given point in time.
Okay.
That means that for a candidate who was not endorsed, that candidate who got 20%, let's say the Iglesia votes in an earlier survey, would lose that 20%.
Yes, yes.
So it's not just what is added to the candidate who is endorsed, it's also what's lost.
Yeah.
But the question is, would an Iglesia who express preference for a candidate who is not endorsed comply with the directive or the instruction or the announcement of, let's say, the church leader? I'm looking forward to what the COMELEC, because the COMELEC has disaggregated voting data right now.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
online.
We're going to be showing that real time.
I'm looking forward to getting that disaggregated data, because it's the best form of data, it's the best data set that we can get in terms of age groups, in terms of, let's say, religious affiliation, in terms of gender groups.
Well, we haven't talked about COMELEC, the data hack that happened, but that data is very. Anyway, I know you won't touch it, Ronnie, because you're ethical. But let's go to the vice presidential. I can't let you go without looking at that. I mean, we've talked about a presidential race that you say is close, because I actually thought that percentage point lead of Duterte is almost unassailable, and you're saying it isn't.
It's significant because it goes beyond the margin of error of 1.55 percentage points. It's not necessarily indicative of how
it's not predictive.
How the votes will turn
these are
out.
not the final numbers.
Right.
But the two images now. One is one of a close, tight election. The other one is a foregone conclusion. I will have Duterte has the vote. You know?
Got it. So let's look at the vice presidential race. And again, when we were trying to figure this out, let's take a look at this survey. Let's do it from time, and from time means from April 2014, right? And if you look at that, that orange is Cheese Escudero. You can see he looks like a roller coaster. And then this purple is Leni Robredo. She started there with 1%, or I think before she declared she was at about 1%, and now she is at 27.7 here, the average of all of them. And Marcos, you can see that they kind of come together, right? Give us an idea of what happened here, and of course, I'm going to end with who's going to win on yours. But tell us what happened
so
here.
Unfair.
I know. Hey, you've got numbers, right? What happened?
That's the unfortunate role of Ronnie, being the numbers guy here.
No, it's much more tightly contested than the presidential race.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Too close to call, no?
Yeah.
You know, it's the same thing. You have 4 contenders with double-digit pre-election preferences, and you have 2 contenders whose pre-election preferences intersected quite recently, even in our own survey.
Yeah.
The figure I have here is something that we had from December 2015 up to the last published commission survey. In December 2015, Leni Robredo had 14.1% of the popular vote.
Okay.
At that time, it was Senator Escudero had 29%, and Senator Marcos had 24%, and Senator Cayetano had 18%. So Leni was at 4th. She started to move up, and what we saw, at least based on our data, based on the surveys, is that a large segment of the votes for Leni are associated with areas where MAR is actually also strong.
So it's consistent,
Western Visayas and
Yeah.
Negros Island. But she has her own support base. This is in the Bicol region. And fairly recently, her voting support in the National Capital Region has eclipsed even the voting support of MAR. So part of it is really the way that she has introduced herself in advertisements.
Yes.
I mean, this is where advertisements take a much more important role. Leni, a virtual unknown at the national level, has a record to show and has to introduce herself. Her awareness went up from, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 30%, and is almost universal right now.
Yes.
We've seen some changes insofar as, let's say, the preference of Senator Escudero, but those came in earlier. Those came in as early as February, when there was a slide that was marginally significant on the part of Senator Escudero. Since then, he has been able to pick up in some instances. The one who has been more or less constant, if you work with survey observations, getting about less than a third to a third would be Senator Marcos. But that again is geographical.
It's true.
You have Senator Marcos getting both the ethno-linguistic, the Ilocano, and then you have Senator Marcos strong in some provinces in Region 1, in Region 2, and even in Region 8. This is Eastern Visayas. And of course, the Ilocano voting population, which is almost the same proportion as, let's say, the Bicolanos. So that's what we have had in the race. Some support is really associated. People tend to vote for Leni. Who vote for MAR will vote for Leni. And people in Bicol who will vote for Leni will vote for MAR. That's why it's much more harder to say how this vice presidential election will turn out. It's as close as we have 4 contenders like the presidential race, but it has become much more tighter than the presidential race. It was tighter from the very start. The shifts are not so significant, and you cannot rule out that the other contenders like the presidential race, even the ones who get in straight ranking 3rd and 4th, will not be able to recover their support because they did have support in certain areas in the past.
Well, what caused Cheese Escudero's roller coaster performance and that decline?
It's hard to say. I mean, it might have been the fact that he advertised quite late. It might be the messaging in the advertisement. It might be essentially what news reports about him. might be his performance in the debate. Again, there are many things you cannot pinpoint. He used to be strong in the National Capital Region. Bongbong also, Senator Marcos has also been strong in NCR. And then now I think Lenny is about a double digit in NCR, about 20%.
So I'm interested in the battleground states. But the battleground, I think, will be NCR for this vice presidential.
Really?
Yeah, I think this is where I feel there will be some movement. If there's some movement towards Senator Marcos here, he might.
Do you agree?
Battleground would not really just be NCR.
Yeah.
For both the presidency and the vice presidency, the battleground regions are the two regions in Luzon that have a high voting share. That's Region 3, Central Luzon, that's 11% of the total voting population, and Region 4A, which is about 14%.
Exactly.
And those are areas, for example, where Senator Escudero can pick up in both Central and Southern Luzon, where Lenny Robredo could actually move up also. NCR, other thing that I think we should factor in would be whether turnout would be high tomorrow.
Yes, I think that's a key issue.
I would
turnout.
think it would be. Would
because
you
some
say?
candidates are strong in urban areas where
Yes.
voting turnout is actually depressed.
A crucial element. Now, I want to say that because when I said NCR, it really was my own understanding also of machines. No?
Yes.
Who controls the governor, the mayors in these provinces? No? When you look at Calabarzon, it's really divided between the political machines of however we define it. No?
Yes.
Between Binay, Mar, and but mostly Grace, no? Okay, and you don't see a little strong political machine of the dead, although there's a strong support now, growing support in those areas. When you look at Pangasinan up, it's a very strong pull. So I'm thinking we're areas there that are locked in already by alliances, local alliances, and my sense is the free for all is here in NCR. Although Mar is not doing well. There's a statement always bandied around that NCR is anti-administration. Is there any credence to that?
There's a basis for that statement because the president is getting the lowest approval and trust ratings in NCR.
Yeah, correct.
I think there's a basis for that statement that the NCR is the least receptive of the administration candidate.
Yeah.
And Secretary Rojas' preference in NCR has not gone up, if I'm not mistaken, beyond even 11 points.
Exactly.
So there's a basis there, but again, if you go back to, you have the turnout and the machine. The function of the machine and the question of turnout are two variables that are critical.
Yes.
Yes. Because let's say I vote in Cavite.
Yes.
There are 7 congressional districts in Cavite. Most of the races are uncontested.
Yes, exactly.
Except for, I think, to a limited extent, relative contestation in 2 districts. You're closer to your mayor.
Yes.
If your mayor is if the mayoralty position is uncontested, that means the mayor would have to mobilize turnout. In the literature of political science, Ranjit and Maria, you have several forms of mobilization.
Exactly.
You mobilize for votes, you mobilize for turnout, or you mobilize for abstention. So turnout and abstention are actually 2 sides of the same coin.
And then also note that governors, a lot of governors uncontested. And so I'd like to also pose that for Ronnie. What do you think is that? How do you think that will be a factor? In the end game, lalo for those trying to catch up, because there are a lot of governors and mayors uncontested, many of them from the Liberal Party. And why is it not resonating with an improvement, or will we be surprised on Monday?
So I'd like to see how it will play up. I'd like to see whether those ties between the national and the local candidates that they're aligned with are ties that are really more reciprocal, and to that extent, the local candidates will reciprocate whatever support they had from the national candidates. And whether the ties between the local candidates and the voters are such
really
that it's quite clientelistic, and in a clientelistic relationship,
you can command votes.
No, not so much command. You can expect reciprocity.
So far, the trend, these campaigns don't seem to go that route. Is that a correct statement?
In the past campaigns, we have not seen it.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
in this campaign, that's why as I said, as a student of politics, and be willing to see whatever, I mean, I'd be ready to see whatever comes out.
Yeah.
And if certain things that are quite surprising come out, then that's an interesting area for us to explore and study even further.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to ask you just one last question. Your fearless forecast tomorrow. Your fearless forecast.
I fear that I should not forecast.
The same here, you know. But there are two images I like to say. One is a contested, you know, closely contested, hotly contested election, and a tight race. And the other is one of foregone conclusion. So those are two images. People can choose, you know, what image they would like. Again, I'd like to also emphasize a factor here is really Comelec. Ronnie and I have been talking about it. The clear and present danger is not really the rhetoric anymore. Not just the rhetoric anymore.
This is
not even
now, right?
It's really the hope that the Comelec will get its act together and be an institution that will affirm our democracy tomorrow. And I'm hopeful. No? I'm optimistic that we'll be able to do that. But you know, we all have to put in our you know, our share as citizens, no, to create less disruption after, not to be part of the disruption after the voting or even during the counting. No, it's going to be a tense May 9 tomorrow, so we have to always.
I like to think exciting, but Ronnie, your last thoughts.
Yeah, exciting times ahead. I'm much more concerned, not so much about the outcome. The outcome we will know in about 2 or 3 days.
You think that long?
2-3 days pala.
Yeah, well, I hope.
Goyo actually said that we could have 87% of the results by 4 a.m. on Tuesday.
Tuesday? So we'll find out the outcome.
We will know
soon. But
so all of us have to wake up early on Tuesday.
The post-election situation is something that, of course, would be uncertain.
Yeah.
We've seen a small plurality president being able to mobilize and reconcile competing groups that happened in 1992.
Yes.
We're getting another president with a plurality vote, plurality support. We've not had a president with majority support anyway since
1986.
Since 1986, there was one president with plurality support. I think that was Quirino, if I'm not mistaken. The only one who did not get the majority support.
Yeah.
And the key there is that the president should be a president that can somehow put the place back in order after a
unify
election. Let's just hope that whoever wins would be capable of doing that, as it has happened in the past. There's really that presidential bandwagon, but I don't know whether that bandwagon would be sufficient to somehow get people in, especially people who might be contesting, contenders who might be contesting the results of the election.
Fantastic. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Please say thank you to UP Political Science Professor Ranjit Rai and Pulse Asia President Ronald Holmes. Up next is UNA spokesman Mon Ilagan. Let us now go to the campaigns and what's happened and how they look at it. But before that, before we go to this one, I want to remind you, there are going to be voting tips that'll come up, but please, on the left side, if you're watching this on the live blog page, you're going to see our editorial team actually putting up every single thing that is happening today. They're taking things apart. Go ahead and vote. Tell us how you feel, and we'll give that data to people like Ronnie Holmes to try to figure out what trends are going through. So, before we go to Mon Ilagan, we're giving you voting tips for tomorrow. Vote. Get up.